Badger fans, we're talking the defense, specifically front seven production in 2023, and how that compared to Fickell and Tressel in their times at Cincinnati, and how did that compare to what we came to be accustomed to for Wisconsin football defense under Jim Leonhard. We'll kind of dive into the numbers behind that, and what's really driving that. And then we'll also talk about 2024 expectations. Obviously, a lot of change in the off season from a personnel perspective, and then obviously the breaking news this week with the James Thompson Jr. injury. How is that going to impact what our expectations are for the front seven in 2024? This is Badgers Analytics with Gardner Fickell. Let's get after it. Right. So we're talking the defense and we're talking the front seven, right? And it's the run stuffers and QB hunters. And a lot of talk in 2023 around how these groups weren't up to snub. And, the coaching staffs talk about it. The media's talked about it. Obviously, there wasn't the depth and athleticism and scheme fit within those personnel groupings, and a lot of changes were made in the off season. And so, right, we'll kind of just dive right into it. Right here is what I call the efficient frontier of run defense. On the y-axis here, you've got yards per attempt, right? So the lower you are in this chart, the better. And then on the x-axis is your stuff rate, right? So really a measure of how explosive are you in the run defense, right? So stuff rate is essentially how many runs are you holding at or behind the line of scrimmage, right? So 0 or negative yard gains on the ground from your opponent is a stuffed run, right? And so what is your percentage there? And this chart is showing, right, there's multiple ways to be a great run defense, right? You've got Penn State here and you've got Iowa, two pretty elite run defenses, not just in the Big Ten Conference, but in the NCAA and the FBS as an entire whole. But there's a pretty big difference in how they get there, right? When you look at Penn State on the far right here, 3.69 yards per attempt allowed. You look at the left, you got Iowa 3.96. So, 0.17 yards per attempt difference there, but a pretty drastic difference in how they're getting there, right? So Penn State has a stuff rate of 15%, a really explosive, really disruptive defense, where you got Iowa who's less than 7%, right? So what does this mean? It means that Penn State obviously is getting in the backfield, making a lot of explosive plays, but it also means that they are more susceptible to some explosive plays to help even out that average. Where you look at Iowa and they may not be making as many explosive or disruptive plays in the backfield, but their linebackers are always in the right place. Their safeties are in the right place to clean up what the offense is trying to do for pretty low gain. And so there's multiple ways to be a great run defense. And Fick and Tress are right in line with Leonhard, with just slightly lower stuff rates, right? So they were at right around 4.5 yards per attempt allowed, where Jim Leonhard's defenses were at 4.25 through all the way through his time as defensive coordinator. So they get it done in unsimilar ways, but the production is very, very similar through Tress's time at Cincinnati and kind of all of Fick's time at Cincinnati there. And what you saw is in 2023, we weren't up to standard. And again, I'll say this goes back to the personnel not fitting the scheme. In particular, I think where you saw this most apparent was in the middle linebacker room. And again, I'm saying it's a scheme fit, not a talent gap. You look at what Mumajong Meta's doing in the preseason right now for Cincinnati, making a lot of plays in his first couple of games there at the NFL level, right? So the fact that he wasn't making those game-breaking type of plays on a consistent basis in college, I don't think says anything about his talent. I think it says everything to do with how that talent fit into the scheme of what Tressel's trying to do and Fickell's trying to do here with the defense at Wisconsin. So I think it's all has to do with scheme fit of the personnel we had in 2023. And I think it gives a lot of credit to Tressel and Fickell and what they did to kind of revamp both the inside and outside linebacker rooms in for this 2024 season. And I think there's a lot of things to be excited about, of not just the guys they brought in, Jaheim Thomas, Tackett Curtis, Sebastian Cheeks, and how obviously Cheeks is kind of moved to outside backer. But what Jaheim Thomas and Tackett Curtis are going to be able to bring to the middle linebacker room, as well as the jump that we're going to expect from Jake Chaney, Christian Alegrio. Obviously, we know Chaney's explosiveness, his ability to go side to side, and then obviously Alegrio. I mean, just an athletic freak. The size, the length, coupled with the athleticism. The sky's the limit in terms of his potential. Are we going to see that come to complete fruition in his true sophomore year? I don't know. I think we're going to see lots of flashes. We'll see how much consistency we see at his peak potential in year 2 for him. But you can just I think the excitement oozes out of everybody when they talk about Christian Alegrio and what he can potentially produce for this Wisconsin defense, right? And that's just the middle linebacker group. Then you talk about John Pius, Leon Lowry, and Daryl Peterson. What steps are they going to be able to bring? Aaron Witt, if he's healthy, knock on wood for him, and you just feel for that guy, and how much injuries have riddled his career at Wisconsin. Hopefully he comes really strong in 2024 and kind of puts all that stuff behind him, right? And so you talk about that group from a 1A, 1B. Obviously that's been thrown around quite a bit from the coaching staff. Sounds like the media, at least from those who can speak to it, are buying in with the outside linebacker group and the depth, athleticism, and production that we should be able to see from that group in 2024. And then, right, when you look at the middle linebacking core, Jake Chaney, producer in 2023, Jaheim Thomas, producer now, albeit not in this system, but very familiar with the staff at Cincinnati, and then did a lot of great work for Arkansas last year in the SEC against that top level of talent. That's going to translate to the Big Ten. So not too worried at all about where we're expecting that linebacking core, who didn't fit the scheme last year, is now going to fit the scheme in 2024. So I think we should expect some pretty big jumps from a run defense standpoint in 2024. Now, obviously, that's predicated off of the defensive line not taking a step back. And obviously, with the James Thompson Jr. injury, that puts that into question. Are they going to take a step back? Obviously, Thompson Jr. was our most productive defensive lineman last year. Take him out of the equation, and you're left with a lot of question marks. Now, I will say, going back and watching through a lot of the tape, a lot of the games from last year, Kurt Neal flashed very, very strongly in 2023, but it was flashes, right? It wasn't that consistent level of production that you'd like to see out of a top guy. And obviously, playing behind Rodas Johnson, probably didn't get a lot of those reps maybe that he deserved. And maybe those flashes would have turned into consistent production, but we're going to need to see those flashes consistently in 2024. We're going to need it out of him. Then, the transfers from the lower level, Brandon Lane, Elijah Hills. Sounds like Brandon Lane obviously didn't come in spring ball, so we weren't able to see him, but obviously he flashed kind of out of the gate. So that's really positive. Obviously, he's got the size of what that staff is really looking for from him, and the explosiveness to match. Elijah Hills, obviously coming from Albany and coming into the spring, not a lot of talk around him through spring ball. A lot of concerns were kind of built up from the fan base around why didn't we hear as much from Elijah Hills. And then the first week and a half of fall camp seemed to be kind of the same story, but the last week and a half of media availability and those guys being able to watch and give us fans, the report looks like he's starting to turn the corner, starting to get a better understanding of the system and playing instinctually and making some plays. So I think the emergence of those two coming in and being able to produce is going to help stifle some of that lost production that we're going to see from James Thompson Jr. I'm not sure they're going to be able to fill it all the way back, just because obviously they're unproven at this level. And what you'd want is a four-man rotation at that position, and then you've got Ben Barton at that kind of interior position, and maybe Brandon Lane's kind of a tweener between the outside and that inside position. Who knows? And what is Dylan Johnson going to be able to provide? Obviously a true freshman. You're not going to be banking on him coming in and playing, but obviously the pedigree's there, the recruiting rankings are there, the wrestling background and how we know that translates. You look at Keanu Benton, you look at Luke Fickell and kind of why he targets those types of guys. It's for a reason, and it's for how they can play with leverage, and that's pretty critical in this system. So I think there's maybe opportunities into the back half of the year, similar to what we saw with Christian Allegrio, is, hey, the personnel groupings and kind of the scheme that he fits into the most, I would hope that he's going to be able to get some time this year. And so what does that level of production give to this group? So I think there's definitely a lot of positive aspects that we should expect from this run defense, given, Kurt Neal takes a step up, Ben Barton takes a step up into more consistent levels of their higher production. Going to need to see that. And then from a Brandon Lane and Elijah Hills, we're going to need to ask a lot of them. And is that too much to ask? Could be. But I do think that the defensive line was maybe unfairly maligned last year as kind of the bugaboo for this team in terms of not being able to stop the run efficiently and effectively and getting to the quarterback. I think they were scapegoated. So even if we do take a slight step back there, in terms of what they're able to give us, I think what this linebacking group is going to be able to cover up a lot of those holes that weren't necessarily there last year, in my opinion. But definitely is a potential for more holes given the James Thompson Jr. injury. But again, I think the linebacker athleticism and scheme fit is going to get us back from where we were in 2023, at least into that level of where Tress and Fickell had that Cincinnati group. And I think if, let's just say, Brandon Lane and Elijah Hills and Dylan Johnson add the type of depth to that top group at the ceiling, I think you're looking at this defense really ramping it up from a run defense standpoint. I'm not going to make any comments on from a pass rush and get into the quarterback standpoint, but from a run defensive standpoint, if those guys hit, Brandon Lane, Elijah Hills hit like I think they will, and you get kind of a lot more consistency at the top end from Kurt Neal and Ben Barton with those scheme fit linebackers, I think we're going to see what we expected in 2023, in 2024. Now, from getting to the quarterback standpoint, 2023 was as bad as advertised. And there's no sugarcoating it. When you look at on a first and second down base, which is the far left, we were 5% below where both Fickell and Tressel expect based on their performance at Cincinnati, and from a Jim Leonhard standpoint, we were about 5% below that from a base pressure on first and second down, not good enough. And then when you look at first and second down, when we're bringing pressure, heavy pressure, wasn't where it needed to be on first and second down. And then on third down, again, lagging pretty significantly across the board, and that's just not acceptable for where we need that to be. And that's where the defensive line, I don't think we can expect too much more from them in terms of what they're going to be able to provide from a pressure standpoint. And we'll see how this linebacking group, obviously John Pius, Leon Lowry, sounds like they're going to be able to cover up a lot of issues from a pressure and quarterback disruption standpoint. But how much is Daryl Peterson? How much is Aaron Witt? I would say those are pretty big question marks, and not a lot of production throughout those guys' time for the UW defense. Now, what we saw from Christian Alegrio, Jaheim Thomas in his time at Arkansas, is that they can get to the quarterback at a pretty high performing rate. And so how is Tressel going to be able to mix up his blitz packages with really athletic linebackers? I think that's one thing that he really likes to do is drop where you don't expect drops and pressure from where you don't expect pressure. And how is that going to be able to generate a lot more disruption with opposing quarterbacks? I mean, you saw Nizer Forkerine, Alex Smith, the safeties. He does like to bring pressure from a lot of different areas, but that's predicated off of having athletic linebackers who can drop and fill in coverage in those spaces. I think with what they've brought in with this linebacking crew, we're going to be able to see that in 2024 because we're going to need more sacks in 2023 from an early down standpoint. We basically generated little to no pressure at all in 2023. Even when on first and second down we're bringing 5+ rushers, we didn't really generate any sacks out of that, and that's not good enough. And obviously, when you're not generating sacks in highly disruptive pressure, when you're bringing 5+ on first and second down, you're going to get eaten alive, right? And we saw that on the times where we brought heavy pressure on first and second down, weren't able to get to the quarterback and got picked apart. And can't have that in 2024. Leon Lowry, John Pius, these inside backers, Brandon Lane, Kurt Neal, hopefully we can get some base level pressure and disruption on the quarterback and help drop these numbers that we're seeing here on first and second down significantly, because the ideal state for Tressel and Leonhard is to blitz a lot on first and second down. They want to bring pressure and be aggressive on first and second down. They don't want to sit back and let you dictate, and that's a pretty big shift from what we saw from Jim Leonhard, right? That's a big shift with Jim Leonhard at 5.5% there. But Fickell and Tressel, they ideally want it at a 25-26% heavy pressure rate on first and second down. That's a big shift. And they also want to do that on third down, is they want to bring pressure, but they didn't bring as much pressure in 2023. And hopefully that changes as we get better in the run game and we get better at not allowing some big plays in the passing game on first and second down that puts them ahead of the sticks, where we can't really dial up as much pressure as Fickell and Tressel would ideally like to on third down. Again, because what needs to happen is obviously we need to bring our first and second down sack rates up. And whether that's through base or whether that's through bringing a lot more pressure on first and second down, like Fickell and them would ideally like to, I think a lot of that would come out of the 3-3-5, not the 2-4-5. from what I've seen out of their historic Cincinnati film that I've watched. But whether it comes through the base or through bringing heavy pressure, we're gonna need to hit the quarterback more on first and second down. It's just not. It wasn't at a position where we needed it in 2023. And again, that's going to come a lot more challenging with the injury to James Thompson Jr. And that's going to be a tough one to overcome. But can Kurt Neal carry the boat? Can Brandon Lane carry the boat? Can Ben Barton make some big plays? Can Cade McDonald, who didn't really get a lot of snaps last year, but his second year in the system, his second year with Brady Collins, are those guys in that room going to be able to make plays? I hope so, because one of the things that happened early on in this camp and kind of transitioning Ernest Willard Jr. to outside linebacker was an interesting move to me, but it also signaled to me that they have a lot of confidence in how those guys in that room developed from 2023 to 2024. You don't make a move with a guy like that early in camp without having a lot of confidence with where that room is at. Now, was that too quick of a decision given the injury to James Thompson Jr.? We'll find out in the first 3 games with the big test against Alabama. But I guess, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me with this staff of, are they making the right personnel decisions? I'd say in the transfer portal in 2023, they didn't hit at a high clip, right? The facts are the facts. They didn't hit at a high clip. Sounds like with the reports that they did hit a high clip in 2024 with the guys that they brought in. And so is that a positive sign that we can expect? I hope so. I really hope so. So again, I think they got the guys in that fit their scheme, fit the athleticism, fit the mold that they're looking for. And I think that's going to translate to production on the field for this season. So that's all I got for you. Again, I'll have more content like this for you all throughout 2024. And now the exciting part is this will be evaluation of actual games, right? It's not anymore talk about camps, not anymore talk about spring ball, transfer portal, who we got, who we lost. It's going to be, what do we put on the film? What do we put on tape? And I can't tell you how excited I am for this season, and going to be bringing you guys as much analytics content as I can provide for you. So subscribe, follow on X, Twitter at GuardYourFickle, because we're going to have much more of this type of content for you for this 2024 season. So cheers to you guys, and looking forward to next Friday.